Hello, everyone, and welcome on the Barricades. This is another edition of our show. My name is Boyan Stanislavski, and with me is co-host of the show, Dr. Maria Czernak.
If you'll allow me, I just want to announce that we are moving now to Poland because very interesting things are happening. It seems it's exactly like in Romania, the so-called progressive, the liberals are putting forward an agenda that is right-wing in terms of economic, but progressive on cultural values. And at the same time, law and justice seem to be putting forward exactly what you're saying. Conservative agenda, but more social democratic policies in terms of economics. And that might be the winning point, even though Donald Tusk made a huge scandal and he gathered millions of people in Warsaw and he threatened that if the vote goes against the civic platform, that is his political party, and the winners would be law and justice, then that would be a cause for civil unrest because it will be the proof that law and justice just did
Forget
something
about it.
illegal.
Forget about
But okay, so
First of all, forget about it because Donald Tusk has said that many times. I've heard his speeches, statements, and all kinds of weird ideas about how strong people are going to come and throw law and justice out of power, like complete nonsense. Those people are just getting, the level of despair is increasing to the point that their brain is melting and they're just prepared to say anything that's catching public attention. And I think this idea about this, they called it the Million Hearts March. That's what they called it. Like 1 million people, meaning metaphor, the quality of the metaphor tells you about the quality of the politics involved here, which is 1 million hearts, meaning 1 million people, of course, good people, good-hearted people with hearts. And they even had stickers that they would put on their clothing. Hearts, blue, sorry, not blue. What am I talking? I was going to say blue and yellow. No, red and white, which is Polish national color. So they had this and they all looked very strange. I would say they were all marching, holding Polish flags and everything was about Poland, which is a major switch because in the past they would gather, they would organize all kinds of meetings and rallies, but they would hold only European flags, sometimes rainbow flags. So that would be that's where their political loyalty would be placed. But now they decided to make this aesthetic switch because they wanted to resemble, I think, I don't know, of course, I don't drink my evening rakia with them, so I don't know. But I suppose they wanted to resemble more like Law and Justice. They wanted to resemble more like patriotic, some kind of aesthetics, that kind of stuff. This was absurd that they're going to be able to gather 1 million people. And of course, they've given government, the opposition has given the government a huge present because now the government can basically rest for the next 2 weeks until the elections and can just make fun of the opposition that was going to bring 1 million people and that was going to block Warsaw and that was going to make such a huge impression on everyone that everyone would start thinking like, wow, they are so big, they are so great, the march is so fantastic, I'm going to vote for them. Of course, this never happens. Have you ever seen anyone switching the sides of the barricade that they are on just because someone marched? Like even if it were 1 million people, which they were not, they were maybe 100,000, maybe 200, maybe 500,000. I don't know exactly. If you look at it, if you look at all the video footage that we've gotten from various drones and photographers and so on and so forth, then you can see that if you do the simple math, how many people can fit on a square meter in that street or that street where they were, then if you had 1 million people, then the whole line would stretch probably from the center of Warsaw to the next town, I don't know, 30 kilometers out of Warsaw or something like that, right? So that's impossible. Physically, it's not just, it is not possible. Then, of course, we have all kinds of banal statements about how law and justice is bad, dictatorship, fascism, what have you, right? And that was the essence of the speech that Donald Tusk gave and a few other politicians, leaders of other opposition parties. And to me, it was super banal. I'm sure it was super banal to other people as well. I don't think that the atmosphere, the kind of emotional upheaval that we've seen on June 4th when they organized a similar march to the one that we witnessed last weekend here in Poland, then back then there was a lot more energy. Now things were not as full of vigor. And I think the closer to the elections, the more they realize that they will probably not be able to win. They might lose by a small margin, which they are probably hoping for, but they're not going to win. And then nothing is going to change that. Like regardless of what Donald Tusk says, that whatever he's going to do, however, many strong people that are going to eject Jarosław Kaczynski from power, that isn't going to change it because no one really believes that except for their own churches. The church of Donald Tusk believes Donald Tusk, whatever he says is saint, great, fantastic. He's like the Pope of that church. And then there is the other church of Jarosław Kaczynski. Whatever happens, however, whatever wrongdoing occurs on this side, it doesn't matter. Everything is fantastic. Jarosław Kaczynski is saint, and this is the other church. And the churches don't like each other. That's Polish politics encapsulated, basically. This is a very sad view, and I don't think that there was any point in organizing this great rally. I've looked at the polls, and of course there are many kinds of polls now, closer we get to the elections, but I can't see even a minor movement at the moment. Like I back then, during their first attempt, first march in the summer, beginning of June, there were certain fluctuations. We've seen them moving forward, upwards, say the Civic Platform, the biggest opposition party, moving upwards like 2%, 3%. It's still within the framework of statistical error, but there was some kind of effect, short-term effect, but effect. Now we don't see that at all. So I wonder what's going to happen. And then we also have in Poland this, in terms of ideology, the party that is closest to what your our party is the coalition of strange right-wing, really strange right-wing groups, some of them rather informal, I would say. They probably had to get formalized in the process of actually getting parliament representation. They're called Confederation, and they're very strange. They're a very strange mixture of monarchists, nationalists, libertarians, very, I would say, very incoherent kind of entity on the Polish political scene. They're also getting now 13% sometimes in some polls, maybe 15. I don't believe they're going to get that, but let's say they're going to get a little over 10. So what? They're still going to be somewhere at the end of the whole, of the list of people, of the list of organizations are going to get into the parliament, and nothing is going to probably depend on them. I'm not saying they're not going to grow their base. They've done a lot over the last couple of years when I think they entered parliament in 2019. So they've done quite a lot. They did use the money and the state assistance that parties represented parliamentary do get in a very good way. They've built structures, they've developed. That's true. The essence is it's similar. No one is going to vote for them because they combine this kind of economic libertarianism and social Darwinism and this nonsense, which, I mean, nonsense, at least from the point of view of the Polish electorate, because I presume that there could be some people watching who actually share such views. But from the point of view of the Polish society, this is complete nonsense. The Polish society, like many societies in the Eastern Bloc, they don't have the historical, the social, the political experience to organize everything along the lines of American libertarianism or Western libertarianism, if you like. They want to have a community and a state, and this state has to play an active role. They want to see a government of action. And that even if it isn't doing much, then it's at least pretending, and they can be part of these rituals that are organized every once in a while. And Law and Justice is doing that perfectly, whereas those people are saying, we're going to lower the taxes, we're going to reduce the taxes, we're going to eliminate some of the taxes, and that's it. On the other hand, you have Law and Justice that are saying, of course, not as radical things in terms of abortion and LGBT, whatever, but they say we are going to increase the child support per month, per kid, per family, from 500 zloty to 800 zloty, which is now almost 200 euros, okay? A little less than that. So from 150 to some almost 200, which is a major increase. I know, inflation, everything, I realize that, but try to look at it symbolically. This is what they say they're going to do. Then they had some other postulate, we'll discuss that, about free medication for elderly, for children, free highways. They've already made the highways free, by the way. Not all of them, but most of them. Already made it so that people can feel it before the elections, right? And now in this is the first school year, and I have 2 children. They go to school, so I experience it myself. They are getting free computers from the school. And this is the first year that this law, which was passed, I think last year, or I can't remember exactly when, that every child that goes to public school has to be equipped with a free computer. They just get free laptops. Now, I don't know, probably they have to give it back after, I don't know, some time. But anyway, even if it's not to them in terms of they don't hand over, then the school does not hand over the very ownership of the device to them, then still you go back, you give it back to the school after 2 years or something, and then you get a new one, probably a better one, so on and so forth. So it's a major relief for many families, right? Because how can you educate a child without a computer these days? Yeah, I'm talking about this kind of matters. And then this confederation, this weird coalition I mentioned earlier, they stand openly, at least part of them, they stand against any kind of child support, any kind of giveaway of any computers, of anything. They just want to. That's why I'm not really concerned, because those people are from a different planet. They don't sit here. This is just not a place for you. Go to the United States, and I'm sure there you're going to have a big base, and you're going to be able to join this or that party, and you're going to enjoy a lot of support. But not here. Our societies are completely different, and you're not going to be able to teach them this kind of ideology, this kind of perception, this kind of understanding. Those people, probably 9 out of 10% that support Confederation, they don't support them because of their ideas, economic ideas, other ideas. They just support them because they are now viewed as some kind of protest party, like a party that collects people who have this kind of anti-establishment sentiment. And this is a great sentiment. The problem is that it's channeled in a very weird organization that doesn't have any options beyond the 10, 15% or something like that. Yeah. And it's just, it's a non-starter for me. So I wouldn't really be very concerned about our. I don't know our, I said I don't know them very well. But to the fact that someone pushed someone or kicked someone or punched them in the face or whatever during a public meeting, that doesn't really mean anything. I've seen such occurrences many times over in many parliaments and in many political situations throughout the Balkans and not only, and they never led to anything other than short-term hype in the media that are able to exploit it to play with the emotions of the public.
The idea is that he's the only one doing it, and I really thought the Romanian politics move forward because let me tell you something. I was watching with my husband just the other day some clips from the 90s, from the 2000s with a very vociferous political leader in Romania. And I said to myself, wow, what years. It was so dark and people were so primitive, brutal, and everything was so bleak. So we can't evolve, at least with the aesthetics of it. But this guy wants us to move back in time. And I'm very afraid. I told him not because he's violent, but because he will be willing to use violence, institutional violence, against all sorts of people that he will be scapegoating for the economic failure of Romania. And the
that's exactly what we have. Yeah, but that's what's happening here. It's something which is in general could intensify. This is something that in general states do. They do repress various groups of people for economic or for political purposes or for ideological purposes sometimes out of like complete craze, which did happen in Poland a couple of times over the past 8 years since Law and Justice have been in power. And of course, this is difficult, but it's nothing apocalyptic. This is just going to be there and it's eventually going to probably go because in order to be able to organize repression against creating specific groups, then it requires a lot of institutional effort. It's not a very easy thing to organize and to maintain. You really need some kind of effort and you need resources in order to be able to solidify this network of repression. But you cannot go back in time and you cannot even restore the glory of the past, which is many right-wingers' wet dream that you can somehow create something along the lines of how things used to function 100 years ago. This isn't going to happen. They will have to bend in order to adjust themselves to the system. I have no idea how are they going to make a political living out of just scapegoating this or that group, unless there are some substantial factors that exist that would enable them to successfully scapegoat this or that group. But then again, how long is it going to take for the general population to get tired of it? I think that's going to happen pretty quickly because if you look at Poland, and I think Poland and Romania are two countries that you can make comparisons between, then they have to come up with some kind of scapegoat every once in a while, or with some kind of outrage every once in a while, maybe once every 2 weeks, maybe once a month, depending on how intense the political period is. But they have to come up with something new. So they will not be able to just cling on to gypsies or to feminists or whomever, right? They're just going to, they might be barking at you and your friends for 2 weeks, 2 months or something like that, and they can put you on blacklist. I'd be honored. Please put me on some kind of blacklist. I'm happy to be canceled. But you're going to be put there, and then the public attention is going to fade away, and they're going to have to come up with something new. So provided their intellectual capacity or incapacity, really, they're going to be coming up with all kinds of increasingly outrageous, conspiratorial nonsense and so on and so forth. So probably going to be more comical rather than anything really dangerous, because in order to be dangerous, you need to have the entire security apparatus on your side. I don't believe that it's going to be that easy. And also let us not forget that the security services in Romania are under full or half full, at least, control of the Americans through the special prosecution, through all kinds of other channels. We've talked about that many times. So I don't quite see how the Americans or the West or NATO or whomever is going to allow them to now use the capacity of the secret services, the secret police, or even the official police to now go after feminists or whomever. And also, I don't believe that the Romanian public is going to be enjoying it for a very long time. So again, I don't really feel that it's anything.
You have the experience because
have
in Poland you have.
Yeah. Now what is it?
No, before I would let you finish your thought,
sure.
but I really want to move to the next pressing thing, and this is the relation with Ukraine. This is very interesting to see that what broke the camel back was the standing ovation from a Nazi collaborator in Canada. And I saw that your Ministry of Education is actually asking the Canadians to extradite that 90 years old man that was loaded in the Canadian Parliament when Zelensky visited. And they also, due to the grain deal arrangements or quarrels around this, they said that they were not going to support Ukraine anymore. And you told me a couple of months ago, and I didn't know whether to hope that might be the case and that you're right, that the conflict between the authorities in Warsaw and those in Kiev is going to only amplify. So please talk a little bit about
No, no, it's not going to amplify because the authorities in Kiev, as well as the authorities in Warsaw, are not in full control of their competence, let's say scope of competence. I mean, they can do something on their own, but other than that, they have to adhere to the framework that is set by the hegemon, which is Washington, of course, the collective West, however you want to refer to it. NATO. This scandal is not going to break out of control simply because this is not in America's interest. And both those countries, both of the capitals, both of the elites are in the same camp. So there is no option, really. Of course, certain things in this Western camp, they always happen at the expense of the weaker part. That's just how things have been since we joined the European Union. You can look at, for example, how things were handled between Bulgaria and so-called North Macedonia over the past year and a half, when everything was happening at the expense, basically, of Bulgaria's interests, if we can really define Bulgaria's interests in that area as they are defined by at least one wing of the Bulgarian establishment. So this is a very important point of reference because everything is based on emotions there. And those emotions, I don't want to disvalidate those emotions. I think they're an important part of actually creating some kind of perception of nationality and perception of maybe community. But then when you enter politics, then you have to start thinking with what are your heavy arguments and what are your options? What are your leverages? How can you stand for something? How can you sustain a position? That's ABC. You really don't have to be a political scientist in order to figure it out. No one's going to care about your sentiments. And this is precisely the kind of Polish political gene. The Polish political DNA has this kind of incapacity where emotions are very important. And again, this is not me talking against politicians employing emotions. This is not me talking against the Polish public or the Romanian public or the Bulgarian public or any public not getting excited over something. This is just me saying that if you're a statesman, if you're a politician, if you want to get something done, that you cannot use the sentiments of your base as any kind of argument or any kind of even point of reference in a serious discussion. And this is precisely the problem that was revealed once again. And this is so deeply embedded in Polish political culture that no matter how many lessons of realpolitik the Polish establishment is going to get, they will never learn. They refuse to learn. Let me just remind you that at the very beginning of this war that started in February 2022, we had ministers, especially one deputy minister of Foreign Affairs in Poland, who said that we are now, and he publicly said it, he's on record, you can find it on YouTube everywhere, we are now servants of the Ukrainian nation. He really uttered that publicly. We're servants of the Ukrainian nation. So this is, like, no one has ever asked the Polish people. I, for example, I don't feel like I want to be a servant of any nation, really. Many occurrences like that actually happen. I'm bringing it up because it's a very symbolic example of the Polish political thinking, non-political thinking, really. It's an emotional thinking about politics. And they were basically demonstrating that they are ready to throw the entire capacity of the nation, the territory, the army, whatever we have, we're going to throw at Ukraine for Ukraine to win this battle, this war, because this is a matter of our sentiment. This is how we feel. We feel we should now serve them. We feel we have to give them everything because they fight the most just cause in the world, which is combating Russia. And of course, this provoked a mass psychosis in the Polish society, something which definitely cannot be described in political terms. It has to be described in psychiatric terms. And this is fading away now. This is fading away. But why? Of course, it's fading away because people are tired of it, because of the 24/7 news cycle, because nobody's so interested in the pornography of the war. That who took what? The Ukrainians have now taken for the 40th time, Rabotinia and Verboya and whatever. No one's interested in that. Not so much. There are, of course, some people who are particularly interested in this, but it's a very small portion of the population. So most of the people are really focused on something else. And on top of that, you have this yet another lesson that was delivered to Poland by Ukraine in terms of realpolitik. Because Ukraine they were expecting that because they employed the emotions of the Polish public, of the Polish society, and so on and so forth, and the West seems to have followed. So now they really believe that they are on a crusade against Russia, and they would think that Ukraine has to give those emotions back, and they have to be thankful. They have to be very polite with the Polish and so on and so forth. The Ukraine said, we have interests here, we have interests there. You guys were giving us things for free for such a long period of time, and then we were, of course, very nice to you. But now you stop giving those things because you don't have anything, by the way, but that's another story. You stop giving those things, so we're not going to be nice to you. Of course, we're not going to be nice to you because we've got other things which are important with regards to Poland, and that are part of our domestic narratives, politics, and so on and so forth. That's history, like Volhynia, Stepan Bandera. That's the question of grain deal. That's the question of not only grain, that's basically the food market. Like, no one noticed. Again, think about it, Maria, think about it. Everyone knows, everyone who studied geography in Poland or Ukraine or in Central Europe, somewhere around here, everyone knows one basic factor about the agrarian business, culture, architecture, structure, whatever. In Poland and in Ukraine, they are the same. They produce the same things. Of course, Ukraine, bigger quantities because they've got better soil and bigger territory. But everything's been the same pretty much since Soviet times, since the end of the Second World War. We grow the same cultures, we grow the same things, we sell the same thing. So since we had opened the borders, obviously this clash had to occur, and obviously this clash had to produce some kind of crisis. Well, they were not able to figure it out. Really, like, it was obvious that things like this are going to happen. And then they were hoping for the emotions to regulate it. But then the emotions somehow didn't kick in and the market took over. And suddenly what happened is that the Polish farmers were facing bankruptcy and started organizing themselves against the government. So the government was confused for a while, but what they had to do that. They had to close the borders. They had to, one way or another, prevent food from Ukraine coming to Poland. And there were many factors, many additional factors about that, which I don't have the time to discuss right now. But the situation was very critical. The government did what they have to do, and they were still hoping that on the basis of the emotions that they thought they had generated on the Ukrainian side by giving them everything that they were able to give, and probably a little more than that, that the Ukrainians are going to keep their mouth shut. And no, of course not, because no, this is not assembly. This is politics. This is international politics. Here, what matters is how strong you are, and how important your backers are, how important your arguments are, how heavy your weapons are, if you like. So this is a very basic truth that was carried, again, to the hands, to the consciousness of our politicians. It just doesn't work. And this is why we're going to be repeating it over and over again. And this guy in Canada, which was, of course, a horrendous event, I was looking at it, I was thinking, whoa, they're really being audacious there. But Maria, you and I know very well that had the situation been a little different, then the media would write about it for maybe 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, maybe 1 week even, I don't know. But that could have been, they could have gotten away with it. They could have. But unfortunately, it's not just Poland. It's also many other countries, and in particular the US, that are getting impatient with Zelensky and are actually allowing the media, the Polish, other governments, maybe other officials, to score points by criticizing Zelensky. So this is, I think, the general context. Had it not been for the general Zelensky fatigue, as some like to refer to it, I'm sure that Polish politicians would have been disciplined. I'm sure that the media would have been disciplined after discovering that this Klimka, I think his surname was, the Nazi veteran from SS Galician, was there. So that's mostly allowed because it plays into the hands of what Washington seems to be thinking about, which is taking down Zelensky and maybe replacing it with someone else. There are many speculations. I don't want to repeat them now because I don't know the situation that well. But I will tell you this, after the elections, everything's going to be okay, I'm sure. It's going to be 1 month, 2 months, maybe after the new year. But everything's going to be okay between Poland and Ukraine once more.
And for the very last part, just a few words on a funny event taking place in Poland. Funny for us, but quite dramatic for a male prostitute that was invited to an orgy by the Catholic Church priests in Poland, in some
in a small town called Dąbrowa Górnicza.
small town. And not only that, but apparently the priests were so perseverant in their quest for pleasure that they managed to get that person unconscious. And not only that, But when the paramedics arrived at the scene, apparently they blocked them from getting to the unconscious person. So the police had to come and make sure that the paramedics get to the male prostitute. Wow, what a story, right? And
Well,
the
yeah.
funny part is that the Catholic Church said, oh, let us not amplify the hate here. Of course, because we are such an inclusive and not hating church that we can expect the
Yeah.
others to behave exactly like you do, right?
Yeah, of course. First of all, I want to say that this is indeed a very funny story. I have not heard so far about priests, Catholic priests in Poland, who would be revealed to have organized a sex party, or like a party that eventually turned into a sex party, which is something you would rather expect of, I don't know, students in their 20s in a dormitory organizing something like that, rather than Catholic priests, which is pretty outrageous probably for people who take the Polish church seriously. There's a decreasing number of people who do that, by the way. But the spicy element is really the fact that they got so aroused that at one point they had to actually invite a male prostitute because their mutual presence now on this party was not enough. So they did call for this sort of assistance. And the guy arrived, and no, it was not like that they BDSM him out of consciousness or anything like that. In fact, it turned out, or this is at least what the media have written about it here. I wasn't really investigating that much because I'm not really interested in this kind of issues so much. And I just want to say that the guy was not suffocated, or he was not subject to any kind of violence. He was just taking some medication. I can't remember the name, which is meant for men with some kind of erectile dysfunctions and so on. And he took too much of it, and apparently this led to the collapse. And then the fact of the matter is that so they were so embarrassed. So they called the emergency number and they explained the situation. So the paramedics arrived, but then they realized that it's actually very embarrassing. The entire situation, Catholic priest, sex party, male prostitute, all the rest of it, that's just a little too much. So they were very reluctant to actually let those people in, hoping maybe that this guy is going to wake up or something. I don't know. But then the paramedics, when they were already there, they didn't give up, but they actually called the police because, come on, we've got an unconscious man. We have to get him out of there. And then the police came and forced themselves through the door, and they actually revealed, this led to this revelation. So that's pretty comical. And of course, the church said that let's just try and not be very hateful about it. Of course, they're going to say, well, what else are they supposed to say? I'm not sure. I really wouldn't like to be in their shoes. One thing which is additionally funny, maybe, I've criticized many times the Polish left here because they are so engaged in various cultural issues. One of their darlings now is the so-called sex industry. And they like to repeat those phrases like sex work is work, basically normalizing prostitution. But then the very same people, they were so outraged about, oh, the church, which is repressing us, is doing all those things. And then many people who are against the Polish left, they started posting their social media posts from the past, where they would say sex work is work, sex work is legal, sex work is great, sex work is empowering, sex work is this. So what do you want? What do you want? They just empower the sex work, right? Same thing the little on the rails, a little bit at one point. Maybe because of the medication that he induced, but that's it. That's it. Otherwise, everything is fine, right? He was empowered. Probably the priests were empowered. Maybe they would have left the church. You never know. So probably per saldo, from the point of view of the sick ideology that they've adopted in recent years, everything's been great. I don't see any point for them criticizing it, except for hypocrisy, of course, which everyone does, regardless of whether they position themselves on the left or on the right. So that's it. That's Poland 2 weeks prior to the elections.
Very nice talking to you and to the viewers. If you like what you saw, patreon.com/thebarricade. We have a small community of donors. Thank you very much. And we reached 3,000 subscribers. Yay.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. See you in the next segment of our show. Bye.
Bye-bye.